Nau mai te koanga ki te whenua. Tēnei te kaupeka tau e tohu ana i ngā timatanga hou. Ka pērā hoki ki te ao tōranga pū, me ngā matikau e tohe ana ki te pūāwai. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihingarangi Forbes, brought to you by the Māngai, Pāho and the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Joining me in studio today are two special guests to talk about one of the most significant seats this election. Ko ngā wāhine ēnei e tātā whāinga ana mo te turu o Ikaroa-Rāwhiti. Ara, ko te kaitono mō Reipa, ko Cushla Tangaere-Manuel, rawa ko te kaitono mo te Pāti Māori, ko Meka Whaitiri. Tēnā kōrua.
Tēnā koe.
What makes Ikaroa-Rāwhiti special?
Oh, it's people. It's people, it's place, it's whenua, it's moana, it's awa, it's villages. It's just an amazing electorate on the east coast of the North Island. First to see the light, but we descend from beautiful, passionate people from Āti Ngata to Te Moana Nui Tariha, and we've got some amazing kai titles in Māngai Pewharangi, Tueni Ngāwai, Henare Tamona. We come from the home of kapahaka champions, and Te Hoko Whitu, Waihirere, and of course Whangara. But we come from beauty too, when I think about Pānia, Mihingarangi, rongo mai wahine. So it's a special place.
She's done a great job at describing Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, but could you add, describe the people?
All I can just build on that. And you know, one thing that I know, and because it's true of me, is most people who live in Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, despite its ruggedness, you know, the landscape, we live there because we're either from there or we want to live there because it's such an awesome place to be. Ikaroa-Rāwhiti's been a food bowl for Aotearoa whānui, not only from the whenua, but from the sea. So we're innovators, we're pukumahi, and I just look forward to being part of revisiting those times.
Did you two know each other before this campaign?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Got big respects for Cushla and her leadership, not just in the rugby, just in general, being a passionate wahine Māori from, of course, Rangitukia, Ngāti Pro, and only if you know people from there, very passionate people. And so I've known her way before her rugby and her whānau.
Yeah.
So it's respect all around.
It's a very special dance Māori do in these seats.
And actually that was, you know, we were commended for that yesterday because, you know, some people have asked, actually straight up asked us if we can have a scrap.
Oh, really? So this seat is 700 k's long and it doglegs into Rangitane country. How did you manage to get across it?
Quickly. To be honest, it is a big electorate. It takes 10 hours to drive. And honestly, it's made up of passionate communities right throughout it. And of course, as being the sort of incumbent MP, getting to every part of the electorate and giving the love has been something that I've strived to do. Of course, we can always do better, but what I've tried to do is get out.
Is it too big?
Massively big. And absolutely.
Too big? Is it too unfair?
Big. Too big, but that's a reflection of the way the Māori electoral seats are set up and how we've got disparities between the two roles. If every Māori jumped on, I think we could have two MPs representing our electorate easily.
You're a proud Ngāti Porou wahine from Rangitukia. So how well do you know the rest of Ikaroa-Rāwhiti?
You know, yes, I'm very proud to be from Rangitukia, but in spite of that whānau, I haven't been tucked away at a marae all my life. You know, I don't just stash myself in Rangitukia. I've travelled the electorate in previous mahi, either as a reporter on marae or as a facilitator of wānanga throughout. But in terms of this mahi, it's very important that I have people on the ground. So I've reached out to networks throughout the electorate because like Meka said, it's huge. And in the short run-up, my priority has been to get out to whānau, where I don't have name and face recognition as strongly. So they get to see me as a kanohi kitea. And just to pick up on that, you know, the issue of our electorate, one of the things I think needs to be considered, not only geographically, is about, you know, just can we really equitably serve each community? Māori want to see us. They want us to show up and hear their whakaaro, not just, you know, we got Zoom and all that, but to really wānanga kaupapa, I think that's an important issue you've raised.
Yeah, maybe a kōrero for another time. Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, like you have said, has a strong political whakapapa from individuals like Sir Apirana Ngata to the first Māori Parliament at Pāpāwai. Do either of you come from political legacies or have a kōrero?
Well, I have to go back, obviously, to Kōti Rikirangi. My uncle was on that rifleman that came back. So obviously activism from my father's side, my mother's side actually. Paratine Tātai was another active leader in Tai-Rāwhiti during the time. His daughter worked in the Rātana Church, but also campaigned to fundraise for our soldiers, right down to my grandmother, who actually was one of the founding members of Matua Whāngai. So we've all got it in our family, the sense of duty, the sense of service, and our tipona's done it religiously, and I think Cush and I are just trying to carry on that legacy.
Yeah, what about yours?
You know, well, I was educated at Ngata Memorial College, so, you know, we were raised with e tipu area. I think the short answer to how I found myself here, because it's not necessarily something I imagined I'd do when I was younger, working on marae was something, was when I was much younger, you know, Parekura did ask if I would consider.
Wow.
Timing wasn't right. I feel like I had to go and have all these various other careers, so to speak, to prepare me for this. But really, my political legacy is probably my mother. And I say to people, I was raised in the beehive of Hine Pari Marae, and just observing hapu and iwi politics has been a great base for me as well.
What did you say to Parekura back then?
What? I did, because he had asked both my brother and I, and my brother has pursued a career, so to speak, in iwi politics. So I moved on to come in, and I'm glad, because timing wasn't right. I was too young.
Did you give him a twinkle in the eye for some time to come?
Oh, yeah, well, actually, I started avoiding him for a little while, because I thought, oh, heck. But definitely had full respect for para, and he's, you know, he laid a really good foundation for some really strong skills and ngākau that I'd like to carry.
Yeah, for both of you. You both have a lot of support in the electorate. We've just been on the road trip, and imagine though if Ikaroa-Rāwhiti could have both of you, because it's so big it could have both of you, and maybe it could because the latest poll Meka could have you through on the party list. So would you support a tū wahine campaign for Ikaroa-Rāwhiti?
Well, obviously our strategy is two ticks Labour, and I've been saying to whānau, to maintain the progress we've made as a party for kaupapa Māori, we need a Labour government. I'm not on the list, like you've said, you've alluded, I'm all in, and I think our people are smart enough to realise, yeah, we could get Meka in the list and Cushla in on the seat. What
about you, Meka? If it's the best for the people of Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, would you support that?
Obviously, bringing in more Māori into Parliament to represent the interests of our people in Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, I would support that. But just like Cush, I'm running a two-tick campaign. You've mentioned that I'm number 3 on the party list. We've also got a young hana coming up on our 4th list, and so there's a lot of ifs and buts. You know, obviously we've got to get party vote to get that list enacted. What I can guarantee your listeners is that on Te Pāti Māori's list, there's only Māori. So when you party vote Māori, then you know it's going to go towards a Māori candidate. And so for us, it's a two-tick campaign, just like Kushla's running her campaign, and our voters will make up their mind. 2 ticks for each. The population growth in Ikaroa-Rāwhiti is the slowest of the Māori electorates, so people are leaving for the cities perhaps. And of those staying, nearly 1/3 aged 15 or over have no qualifications in the last census. So that's the highest proportion of any electorate in New Zealand. When you consider the East Coast, what do you think about that? About people leaving the region? About how 1/3 of your people over 15 don't have any qualifications. Why is that? You know, there's nothing like having a sense of purpose, right? And I think, you know, originally we got thinking about innovation. And sometimes I think we actually might have to go backwards to go forwards in terms of wānanga. I used to work in PTEs and did a bit of work at Tūranga Araro. So I understand some of the restrictions they have around bricks and mortar buildings and getting people into them. And one of the cool whakaaro I heard was from Ngā Hui Ngata, may she rest in peace, talking about education between rohe, not so much just in rohe. And one of the things I loved about working in wānanga was the affirmation of our own knowledge. So it's about us thinking about ways that we can wānanga on our own knowledge and acknowledge those as skills versus qualifications to get people into work. And that's why cadetships work. You know, Labour invested in 1,400 just last year. And I mean, I've got
cousins who have a trade because their father moved to Wellington as part of the trades training movement. So it's about not just acknowledging academia, but acknowledging that we're hands-on as well.
Is it about taking the education or the micro-credential, whatever you're talking, to the kāinga?
Yeah, I think we've got to look at all options. And, you know, we've got technology now. We saw it being used throughout COVID. But it's also about acknowledging and giving some mana to our traditional mātauranga methods.
So, you know, there's no big universities up the East Coast, and the polytechs haven't been that popular, obviously, based on those statistics. So if you had a magic wand, how would you do it differently?
So I'd like to see a Māori-led education authority, because for too long we've trusted in mainstream to deliver the sort of education outcomes our people deserve, and it hasn't delivered. I mean, you've just raised the point. So when I talk about a Māori education authority, I think everything we've seen gains in our education system for Māori, whether it's kōhanga, kura, wānanga, has come out of protest. So every gain has been a hard-fought one. With Te Pāti Māori, we're saying, well, we've given all these models, they do deliver, they do produce results. Why can't the government just fund us to do that?
So if you did get yourself a Māori led education system, how would you like them to provide for those little pockets up the East Coast, in the Hawke's Bay, in the Wairarapa?
Well, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge all our teachers and kuras that are educating, particularly up the coast. You know, I'd like some equity around some of the funding around some of the buildings. Some of them are leaking. I want, you know, some putia gone in there to strengthen the teachers in what Cushla said, in our mātauranga space. We don't do enough of that. So it'll be a completely different model to what we've got, inspired by some of the leaders that come out of our areas, you know, and what got them to where they've got to, and using and trusting that our knowledge base can produce the education those young people so badly need. They're caught in a bit of a cusp because we've got these Western models versus what we want them to aspire. We want them to be at home, if they want to be at home, working effectively within the community, or we want them to go out to the world to get those extra skills to bring home. That's the ambition, and a Māori Education Authority will help deliver that.
I think the messaging too, you know, when I grew up, I was told two things: you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer. We need to turn that around too. And I think kura kaupapa's come a long, kohanga, kura kaupapa, and have come a long way in saying, hey, he Māori koe, tūkaha koe i roto i tō Māoritanga. I think now we've got to, rather than say, we, you know, this, find value in your life, how can we help you do that?
In jobs and roles like forestry and like land and land use, and all, which is really, really needed up the East Coast. I want to just bring something that Meka talked about, and you touched on kōhanga reo. If you were to get in, would that be a motivation for you? Because when you look at kōhanga reo around the country now, and I bet you the East Coast is no different from anyone else's, they're short of kōhanga. We used to have 830, we have 420 now, and we've got 1,000 mokopuna on the waiting list. What would you do differently?
I used to be a kōhanga reo kaiako, ironically. That was my first paid job, so to speak. So I work with Kōhanga Reo National Trust and the whānau on the ground to see what the solutions are for them. Because you can't beat being educated in your Māoritanga. You know, kia tipu mai koe I roto i tō reo me o tikanga. So I don't have all the answers inside me, but I think that's the best approach, is to go around, talk to our whānau, because obviously we have a kōhanga reo where I'm from, which feeds the kura kaupapa whose board I'm on. And just ask why, because I was talking to someone who works for the National Trust the other night, and just saying, why, you know, we've got this pay equity, which is fantastic.
If you're
payable. Why can we're still having recruitment issues? So we've got to work on making kōhanga reo, I'd like to say, the first choice for whānau Māori, but if not, why? Answer those questions so we can address them.
Well, the reason that it's not a choice for kohanga is when we talked to a kaiawhina in Wainui-o-Mata, she said she has to choose between putting gas in the car or kai on the table. It's not enough money. And she's stressed at 20 years old. So, you know, when you were in the Labour this government. Did we drop the ball with kohanga?
So obviously there's been some gains under Labour, but again, that's just...
in pay parity.
In pay parity,
but in
slowly.
terms of the whare, you know, there's not enough whare anymore. There's a waiting list.
This is why I'm suggesting honouring the Y claim 2336, which is the kohanga claim. It's been around for a long time. It's addressing the inequities, but also talks about a way forward. And Labour has started with the pay parity, but what we're saying is more needs to be done to honour the kohanga movement, where it started, who was involved, and like you said, how do we create that as the first place for our whānau to put their mokopunas in? And, you know, all we can do is acknowledge the movement, but I think that Y claim needs to be honoured.
Ka pai. Well, we spoke to people up and down the coast. They said there were few opportunities to grow in their roles, in their employment roles as they had. One person said locals should be considered for local contracts like fixing the roads, but those contracts go to out-of-town companies. They're talking about procurement and they want local people working on local problems. Are you aware of this issue up the coast?
You know, when I drive to Gisborne and I see trucks with the likes of Parata, Black Bee and Ikaroa-Rāwhiti contractors on them, you know, it definitely warms my heart, because I know also not only are they providing local knowledge to provide the local solutions, they're also providing local jobs. So that's certainly something I'd advocate for, because I saw it, you know, so roading's obviously a big issue right now, but I've seen it in the past as well with forestry contractors, drivers, etc. Yeah, so that's definitely something I'd advocate for.
And, you know, how do we propose to grow local businesses through the idea of local procurement?
Yeah, so Te Pāti Māori has a 25% procurement policy that would guarantee...
Is it realistic though?
Well, you've got... Labour had 5, you know, so 25 because...
Is that an aspiration?
So that's part of our policy, that part of growing economic opportunities for Māori, you've got to put a PO in the ground around the government's procurement policy. I mean, it's billions of dollars.
So would it be like the Gisborne District Council, District Council, you'd require them to employ, the procurement would be 25% Māori businesses or people or whatever?
Absolutely. So not just local councils, but actually central government, because they put a lot of contracts as well. So the thing around the 25% is absolutely a goal to achieve. But when you come back to the roading, and you've asked the question around the roading, there's these tiers in this country, you know, the Holton, Hogans, and the Māori ones that we want is to make sure that they're treated no differently to those tier ones. And so when we talk about procurement, there's also understanding the mechanics of how you do procurement. And so it's not just 25%, but we know where the hot spots are to make sure that Māori do get access into it. So that's just one. But, you know, we've got an economic policy, Oranga Tangata, Oranga Whenua fund of about 4.5 billion.
So if you did get the numbers and the Māori Party was part of it and you had a 25% procurement there, how would you then develop the contractors, the workers to fill those jobs?
Well, that's the beauty. You know, some of the companies that I mentioned have been in the game for a long time. They've worked their way up, some of them from being the stop-go person. In the case of Black Bee, you know, it's a second generation that are in the role. So a lot of them are already doing that now.
Would you like to see them raised up the tiers? I guess you're talking about, so they might be tier 3 or something like that, but they want the bigger contracts?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd like to see that in every industry. You know, we need hapu and iwi involvement throughout the motu in providing these situations from design to delivery. Yeah.
One of the issues up the East Coast and in the Hawke's Bay is forestry. Hekia Parata, who authored the report on land use, and Slash says the industry has lost its social licence for forestry, and widespread felling of up the coast and in Wairoa needs to stop immediately. Do you agree?
So clearly I acknowledge Hekia's work in the report and the way she went about it, and she did some very strong recommendations. The challenge for other people who are not from our region is that we don't have an industry we can pivot to. So if you take away forestry, what are we going to pivot to? So it's not saying they should stop, and I want to acknowledge those forest owners, and we've got Ngāti Porou owners in forest, as in other iwi, that they've got a win-win solution. It just doesn't get cut through for our region. So yes, they've lost the political licence, but 2, they're actually doing something about it. But 3, and more importantly, you can't remove some economic industry without first replacing with something. Otherwise, you're going to lead to more.
What do you replace it with? I mean, because she literally says you've got 10 years to do something. Otherwise, it's overs.
Well, you know, having spoken to people at home, it's exactly what Meka said. You know, someone described it like an abusive marriage. You know, sometimes it takes a while before you can leave to move on to something better, because we still have, when COVID struck, one of our big concerns was the mental health of people working in our forestry industry. So we can't just remove them from jobs immediately. But you've got people on the ground like Hera Ngata Gibson, you know, who's very passionate about this and talking about, let's pivot eventually, let's be part of the solution, you know, cleaning up debris and all that. Let's turn those into jobs as well for our people. And I think that's going to be something that we have to advocate strongly for, is to make sure that those jobs go locally.
I want to see the return of sheep farming on the coast. So it was the government through Bowler that created us to get out of farming into planting trees. So it should be the government that actually helps the 10-year transition.
And should the government also then be part of the clean-up, because some of those forests are only in cycle 1 and they've got 2 to go.
Yes.
So, you know, some people up the coast told us that they've kind of been tricked into that after Bowler and sold a bit of a sausage. Should the government be bailing them out?
They should absolutely be stepping forward, because they're the ones that motivated the plantation of the forestry because of Bowler. And now, here we are, 3 generations later, well, not 3 generations, 3 decades later, that we're sort of, our hands are tied, our options are...
Dealing with the first cycle.
Dealing with the first cycle, but what I'm saying is I have every confidence of those at home with a way forward. They won't be fooled again.
It won't be in the immediate future, so we're still going to have, you know, those big heavy trucks on your crumbling Highway 35. Do you support the Blue Highway?
The feedback at the moment is that the priority is State Highway 35. That's still the lifeline in and out of the coast. One of the things I think about with the Blue Highway is, you know, we've actually got to go back to communities and ask how they feel, because nā rātou te moana rā, nā rātou te whenua rā. So, you know, I'm not saying there's not a space for it in the future, but it's not for me to speak for those individual communities.
One of the things after the cyclone that we're hearing on the road is that while mental health was bad before, it's actually threefold now, and they've got addictions, and alcohol's become people's best friend because they're dealing with trauma and the rest of it. You made a lot of promises about the rehabilitation, the night beds 6 years ago, and you know, what more would you do?
Labor made those commitments.
You were on my panel?
Yep. So what we did secure is, I think, 17 million to build a purpose-built mental and health addiction centre in Gizzy.
Yeah.
I don't know why we still haven't seen that fruition from 2017, but the funding was put aside, and that was in recognition that the need was really prevalent, particularly for the coast, because they had to travel all the way to Pāmi, all the way to Waikato to get any services. Since that time, Mihi, I just want to acknowledge all those that have come to the fore, that have put their hand up to play an assistant role in that mental health, like the Dianes and Mark Kopuas with Mahi Atua, like Mihingarangi and Sunny Smith, the gang league meth treatment in Kahukura, Wānanga down in Central Hawke's Bay.
One voice.
But they've had to bang their heads against the system to get any pūtea to deliver those much needed programs.
How are you going to get funding devolved to local solutions?
First of all, I just want to acknowledge, you know, she's acknowledged Mark and Di, etc. So it's been great that they've been a part of that. And
they've been forced. They've been forced into those situations, like Lindsay from from One Voice. You know, she was just dealing with addictions. Now she's dealing with everything.
So one initiative that I'm reluctant to say, because it was founded by my sister, but my sister founded the first ever marae-based 8-week rehab program. And it works because you can bring your whānau. It's very simple. You know, the infrastructure is very simple. So I'd like to work on more solutions like that, so we don't have to, you know, marae exist. They provide healing just by virtue of you being in them. They dictate a different type of behaviour. So I'd like to explore more models like that.
Yeah, up and down the coast.
Up and down the country, because while it's currently been based in Ngāti Porou, the intake is not limited to Ngāti Porou, and so it will grow, which is going to mean she's going to need support to you know, with support staff. But the beautiful thing is it also runs on a tuakana taina model. So when graduates, and I've been to graduations, and it's just absolutely so moving, because like mental health, all these issues cannot be treated in isolation, eh? It's the tangata and it's the whānau. And so when you have them as part of the movement, because anything you go through, once you go through it on your own, you go back to your environment, it's much harder to deal with. So that was a long answer, but yeah.
That's right. You know, as we know, half of your electorate is under 25, because that's just how we are as Māori. Probably younger in yours, but I didn't look at the exact numbers. The rangatahi that we've spoken to say, oh, we love Te Pāti Māori because they're on TikTok, because they're on TikTok. And I looked at your TikTok and your Insta, I looked at your TikTok and your Insta. Do you think you're talking to rangatahi?
Well, I've got 2 rangatahi sons, and it's actually 70% of our demographics is under age of 40, 50% is under 25, and I think we've got a younger demographics in Ikaroa-Rāwhiti. So how do I know I'm talking to young people? Because my sons say, Mum, don't get on TikTok. So I get warnings.
But they tell, the ones we're talking to say they want to hear you on there. Are you following rangatahi?
I engage with rangatahi in
Careful,
schools.
because I've looked at your thing.
Yes, schools.
You're following hardly any rangatahi. You're both following politicians.
I can barely follow
and
myself,
leaders.
Mihingarangi.
Do you think you probably need to follow more rangatahi and get on the TikTok?
One of my main advisory panels is completely comprised of rangatahi, and they are my iramatu. And I'm proud to say that me standing has inspired them politically. You know, some of them are enrolled to vote for the first time. They've become my little campaign team. And you're right, you know, I'm awkward. You know, I was a reporter trained by Derek Worcester to be, you know, like, Miss Prim and
Straight
Proper.
back.
No, doing dances on TikTok. But I've just come from rugby, where a big part of my mahi was engagement and development of rangatahi. No, but that's good advice. I will start following more closely some of our rangatahi leaders on Insta.
What's your message to rangatahi? You've got about 30 seconds. Why should they vote for you? How are you going to reach them?
Yeah, so just that I want the best for them. I want the absolute best. I care and I'm passionate about your future. You have so much to give right now. You're not our leadership for tomorrow. You're our leaders today. And what we're doing with Te Pāti Māori is acknowledging your uniqueness as young rangatahi. And hopefully our policies, I know, in housing, education, employment, economic, will deliver the very pathway that you so much deserve as rangatahi.
Kush?
Tēnā koutou rangatahi mā. It wasn't too long ago I was you. And I understand, you know, you're probably thinking, why vote? Everything that goes on in your life is impacted by your vote. And you know, we've got so many good kaupapa Māori that have come out of labour. We've got housing, apprenticeships, and I want to provide more for you. I want to talk to you. So get out there and vote, whānau. 2 ticks Labour. Push for Cush. Pick me in 23. We'll get more in 24, and we'll thrive in 25.
Get into politics so all these aunties can get out of the way, eh? Tēnā kōrua, it's been an awesome wānanga. Thank you for all your ideas and your laughter, bringing a bit of laughter to our panel. Tēnā kōrua, tēnā koutou katoa. E hono mai ki tēnei whakawhitinga kōrero I tēnei rā. Ia tātou e kai namu atu nei ki te kai kōwhiringa pōti, tētehi take nui tai ori ki a tātou katoa. Mā te wānanga ka mārama, mā te mārama ka mōhio. Ka nui te mihi ki te puna whakatongarewa me te Māngai Pāho. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back in a fortnight. No hora mai.
Ko te reo, te take.